According to Hinduism, the Yamuna River is considered a river of heaven and is believed to cleanse the mind of sin. Every year, thousands of people drink from and bathe in the water despite its toxic foam, which is the result of poorly treated sewage that's constantly dumped directly into the river. Various chemicals in the foam are known to have many negative health effects, including skin irritation, hair loss, breathing issues, and brain damage. Earlier this year, a former model and Miss Switzerland finalist was allegedly murdered by her husband, who then reportedly dismembered her body and pureed her remains in a blender. In 1947, there was a case in Louisiana where a young man failed to die during a botched electric chair execution, so his lawyers tried to argue that he had already been executed and that it was cruel to go through it a second time. After much deliberation, the Supreme Court eventually ruled against him, and the man was successfully executed by electric chair the next year. In 1998, SNL star and renowned voice actor Phil Hartman was shockingly killed in his sleep by his wife Brynn. She then showed her friend the body, locked herself in a bathroom, and turned the gun on herself. Futurama's Philip J. Fry was named in honor of Phil Hartman, who was supposed to be the voice of Zapp Brannigan before he died. About 50% of panda births result in twins, but panda moms always focus on raising their strongest cub while letting the other ones starve to death. Therefore, zookeepers have to switch the cubs every few hours to trick the mom into caring for both. In 2019, a horrific bungee cord accident caused this Taiwanese man's iris to completely collapse. The father of physics, Max Planck, lived a life that was filled with tragedy. His wife died young, his oldest son died in World War I, his two twin daughters both died while giving birth, and his second son was executed by Nazi Germany because of a failed assassination attempt on Hitler. Within seconds of the band Great White taking the stage at the Station nightclub in 2003, faulty pyrotechnics ignited the flammable acoustic foam that surrounded the stage. Far exceeding the building's capacity, all 462 people quickly flooded the exits as the entire building was rapidly engulfed in flames. But many struggled to find the exits due to the heavy smoke, leading to a pileup at the front entrance that prevented anyone else from escaping. Multiple survivors also claimed that two bouncers blocked the stage door as fans attempted to escape the building, telling them that the door was only to be used by the band. In the end, 100 people lost their lives, including Great White's guitarist Ty Longley. One man named Mike Vargas managed to survive for 90 minutes inside the building. He was trampled by a mob trying to escape and only survived because he was insulated by all the bodies burning around him. He walked out with only minor burns but still suffers from severe PTSD. An X-ray revealed that a 300-year-old Mexican statue of Jesus has real human teeth. They're believed to have been donated by worshippers as a way to get closer to the religious figure. After killing his girlfriend with a hatchet, 30-year-old Philadelphia man William Kemmler became the first person to be executed by electric chair. While it was supposed to demonstrate the effectiveness and humanity of electrocution, the punishment went horribly wrong. They underestimated the amount of electricity needed to quickly and painlessly end a man's life, so Kemmler was still conscious after the first shock. When physicians noticed he was still breathing in agony, they hit him with a second shock that was more powerful, causing his entire body to convulse violently and start smoking. Kemmler ended up with bubbling skin, melted eyes, and a foaming mouth, and the entire room reeked of burning flesh as many spectators ended up passing out from the horror. But despite this, the electric chair would still continue to be used for more than 100 years afterwards. In 1989, Canadian hockey player Duncan McPherson completely vanished at an Austrian ski resort. 14 years later, in 2003, his mangled body and snowboard were found in the ice on the mountain, showing severe injuries consistent with machinery impact. Investigators concluded that he was accidentally run over by a snowcat and buried in a small gap, where his body remained hidden for more than a decade until the glacier started to melt. In 2021, zipline instructor Joaquin Romero tragically fell to his death after sacrificing himself for a customer. Realizing the zipline couldn't support both of their weights, he released himself to save the client. In the year 2000, Pakistani archaeologists announced the incredible discovery of an ancient mummy, believed to be the daughter of Persian King Xerxes the Great. This sparked a heated diplomatic dispute, with both Iran and Pakistan fighting over ownership of the amazing find. However, after closer examination, museum curators discovered that the mummy was actually a woman who died from blunt force trauma in 1996. It may have even been the victim of a violent murder. Several people were arrested for the massive hoax, but the woman's identity and the details surrounding her death remain unclear to this day. Best known for playing Robbie Rotten in Lazytown, Icelandic actor Stefán Karl Stefánsson was told his pancreatic cancer was inoperable at the young age of 43. He died a few months later and wanted no funeral, instead requesting to have his ashes scattered in secrecy in a distant ocean. He will always be number one. Throughout South London, you can find large sections of fence made out of stretchers from World War II. They were used by civil authorities to transport the wounded when England was bombed by the Nazis. Just 2 months after 9/11, another commercial airliner, American Airlines Flight 587, crashed into a Queens, New York neighborhood just after takeoff. 265 people were killed and several homes were completely destroyed. One of the victims had previously survived the 9/11 attacks, only to end up dying in another tragedy. 5 days before her wedding in September of 2009, Yale medical student Annie Lee suddenly went missing in the basement of a Yale laboratory. On the actual day she was supposed to get married, her body was found hanging upside down inside a wall cavity in the building. Her murderer, a lab technician who worked in the building, was eventually caught and sentenced to 44 years in prison. After suffering a stroke in 2010, UK woman Sarah Colwell started speaking with a Chinese accent despite never even visiting China. No matter how hard she tries, Sarah can't return to her normal voice. She became one of less than 100 people to ever be diagnosed with foreign accent syndrome, a rare neurological condition caused by damage to the speech part of the brain. In 1981, 3 young men found the murdered body of a woman laying in a roadside ditch in Ohio. She was known as the Buckskin Girl because of the poncho she'd been wearing, but police struggled to identify her for decades. That was until 37 years later in 2018 when DNA analysis identified her as hitchhiker Marcia King. Her mother had still been living in the same house with the same phone number, never giving up hope that her daughter may return home one day. Marcia's murder remains unsolved, but the case is still open. In a form of doping known as boosting, wheelchair athletes with spinal injuries will sometimes intentionally injure themselves below the waist to cause their bodies to respond by raising blood pressure, thus enhancing their performance. Techniques include clamping down on a catheter to overfill the bladder, breaking toe bones, and administering electric shocks to the legs, feet, and testicles. Boosting has been completely banned by the International Paralympic Committee since 1994. Found in a jungle cave in 1867, a feral boy named Dina Sanichar preferred eating raw meat, had trouble standing on 2 legs, growled like a wolf, chewed on bones to sharpen his teeth, and never learned how to speak. He eventually became the inspiration for Mowgli in the Jungle Book. In 2016, 11-year-old Nebraska girl Lulu Gilreath was going on her first carnival ride when it quickly turned into anyone's worst nightmare. Her hair got caught in the machinery of a spinning ride at a carnival, and her scalp was almost completely torn off. The horrible accident damaged both of her eyes and nearly killed her. After World War II, Japanese General Hitoshi Imamura was sentenced to 10 years in prison after failing to control his unit, which committed horrible atrocities toward Allied soldiers. Believing that his own sentence was too light compared to the men under his command, Imamura built a replica prison in his garden where he stayed for decades until his death in 1968. In March of 1998, 23-year-old Virginia woman Amy Lynn Bradley was on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship to Curacao when she suddenly vanished from the balcony of her cabin around 6 a.m. The Coast Guard conducted a 4-day search in surrounding waters but found no trace of her, so authorities concluded that she simply fell overboard and drowned. But in the years since, there have been several reported sightings of Amy that suggest she may have been kidnapped and forced into human trafficking. 1 year after she went missing, a U.S. Navy sailor claimed he met a woman named Amy in a Barbados brothel who matched her description and begged him for help, but he didn't report it at the time. In 2005, an anonymous email was sent to Amy's family containing 2 photographs of a sex worker who closely resembled Amy, but nothing ever came of it. Despite various other sightings of the woman with men holding on to her, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared legally dead in March of 2010, 12 years after her disappearance. In 2011, 6-year-old Illinois boy Timothy Pitson was taken out of school by his mother to go on a trip. She then ended her life and left a note saying Timothy is safe at the hands of someone trustworthy and would never be found. The boy hasn't been seen since, as here's an updated age progression image of what he may look like now. The Vietnamese version of Cinderella is much darker than the family-friendly version we know and love. In the end, Cinderella boils her stepsister to death, turns what remains of her into a sauce, and sends it to her stepmother to eat. She enjoys the sauce so much that she eats it all until she finds the skull of her dead daughter and dies from shock. In 2015, a 46-year-old woman accidentally took 55 milligrams of pure LSD, equal to a staggering 550 times the typical dosage. She apparently blacked out for the first 12 hours and felt pleasantly high for the second 12. The next day, her lifelong foot pain had ceased, which helped her kick her morphine addiction. JFK's older brother Joseph most likely would have been the presidential candidate instead, but was killed in a top-secret flying mission during World War II. John once said that he never would have gotten into politics if his brother Joe had survived. In 2014, a Jamaican phone scammer threatened to kill a retired American man named William Webster when he wouldn't fall for his scam. But the scammer didn't know that Webster was the former director of both the FBI and the CIA. When he flew to New York City in 2017, he was immediately arrested and sentenced to 6 years in prison. This is the harrowing skull of a man with Proteus syndrome, a rare and awful condition characterized by the overgrowth of skin, organs, tissues, and bones. Nikola Tesla originally expected to live to the age of 150, but later lowered this estimate to 135 years when he was forced to give up alcohol due to prohibition. He thought that consuming alcohol was good for the body and was a heavy drinker as a result. Tesla ended up dying at the age of 86. When revolutionary hero Guy Fawkes was convicted of high treason in 1605, his punishment was to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, meaning he would be hanged almost to the point of death, have his intestines and sex organs removed while still alive, decapitated, and have his limbs torn off. After the sentencing, Fawkes said "fuck that" and leapt from the gallows so that the rope broke his neck and killed him immediately. The drawing and quartering was still performed on his corpse, and his body parts were paraded around London. Christine Palillo was a bullied outcast at school until two popular girls befriended her and gave her a makeover, helping her achieve the title of Miss Irresistible from her school's student body. But just a few months later, Christine and her drug addict boyfriend would end up brutally murdering the girls and two others in a botched drug deal. One of the girls tried desperately crawling to her phone after being shot in the groin, until Christine bashed her skull in with the butt of her revolver. Serial killer Dennis Rader used to install security systems for homeowners. Many of his clients wanted the security systems to keep the BTK killer from ever entering their homes, unaware that he was in fact the one installing them. In 2017, Glenna Durham killed her husband after shooting him 5 times. Soon afterwards, the couple's pet African gray parrot started repeating the words "don't effing shoot" in the husband's voice. These were assumed to be the husband's last words, and the woman was eventually found guilty of first-degree murder. In 2009, 25-year-old chemistry student Vladimir Likonos died after his chewing gum exploded in his mouth. He had a strange habit of dipping his gum in citric acid for extra sourness, but accidentally used an explosive powder from his chemistry experiments that was 4 times stronger than TNT. Likely caused by the reaction with his saliva or chewing pressure, the explosion blew off his jaw and led to his eventual death. According to a 2011 study, children exposed to family violence show the same patterns of brain activity as soldiers exposed to combat. Throughout Chinese history, it was common for parents to castrate their boys as a way to escape poverty. Both the shaft and the nuts would be sliced off with a knife at the same time. These castrated members of society, known as eunuchs, were considered thoroughly pure and therefore qualified as high-ranking civil servants. This disturbing system lasted until 1924, with the last imperial eunuch dying in 1996. In 2009, Florida woman Carol Bryan received facial fillers that were mistakenly injected into the wrong spot, causing her forehead to swell up so severely that she went blind in one eye. Carol went from a fashion model to a recluse, refusing to leave her home for years due to the monstrous appearance of her face. Medical students in the UK were recently left astonished after the autopsy of a 78-year-old man. He unknowingly lived his whole life with 3 dicks, an extremely rare condition known as supernumerary penile formation. Polish adventurer Alexander Doba kayaked solo across the Atlantic 3 times, once at the age of 70. 4 years later, he reached the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, sat down for a break, fell asleep, and never woke up. In 2009, 2 women bet 28-year-old Russian man Sergei Tuganov $4,300 that he couldn't last 12 hours in bed with them. He won the bet, but later suffered a fatal heart attack after consuming an entire bottle of Viagra. Macho Man Randy Savage died from a massive heart attack while driving with his wife, as an autopsy later found his coronary artery to be 90% blocked. Just a few days before he died, Randy had a routine checkup with his doctor who suggested a heart scan, which would have easily detected the fatal blockage, but Randy decided to put it off until his next visit. Known as the meteor, this was the result of 5 floors of the World Trade Center being compressed together when the towers collapsed on 9/11. It's not known if there are human remains inside. After failing to assassinate King Louis XV in 1757, Robert Francois Damiens was sentenced to be executed by having his skin ripped open, molten lead and sulfur poured into his wounds, and dismemberment by 4 horses. Upon hearing this, Damiens replied, "Well, it's going to be a tough day." During the execution, Damiens was reportedly still alive after all of his limbs were ripped off, so his remaining torso was burned at the stake. Earlier this year, Russian pro chess player Amina Abakarova apparently needed a way to knock her opponent out of a tournament. So she decided to go to the extreme and poison the woman, 30-year-old Ume Osmanova, in what's being treated as an assassination attempt. Amina poured mercury from a thermometer onto the victim's chessboard before her next match and smeared it all over her side of the board with one of the pieces. Osmanova said she began feeling unwell during her match 30 minutes later, complaining of sudden severe nausea and dizziness, prompting an immediate call for medical assistance. After the security footage was reviewed by authorities, Amina had no choice but to confess to the murder attempt. Osmanova ended up making a full recovery, as the attacker was banned from future chess competitions and stripped of her previous titles. Abakarova now potentially faces several years in Russian prison for the senseless attack. American actor and model John Eric Hexum was once seen as the next big thing in Hollywood due to his charming looks, charisma, and radio voice. But in 1984, he died on the set of the TV show Cover Up after accidentally discharging a blank cartridge into his skull. Hexum had apparently been playing Russian roulette with a prop gun during a break in filming, and the muzzle blast caused enough blunt force trauma to fracture a piece of his skull that propelled into his brain. Serial killer Israel Keyes went the extra mile to ensure that he would never be detected. He had no preferred victim type and never killed in the same area twice. For one murder, he flew to Chicago and drove 1,000 miles all the way to Vermont in a rental car, then used a murder kit he'd hidden there 2 years prior. When shopping on his murder trips, he always kept his phone turned off and only ever paid in cash. But Keyes was caught in 2012 after using a victim's credit card when he didn't have any cash on hand. While working in his garage in 2012, Chicago man Dante Autolo accidentally shot a 3-inch nail directly into his skull. But he had no idea the nail had entered his brain until he started feeling nauseous 36 hours later, and a dozen doctors were completely stunned when they saw his x-rays. The nail was surgically removed and Dante miraculously made a full recovery. After his meth-addicted wife spread a false rumor that he was a pedophile, Australian father Bradley Lyons was kidnapped and attacked by a vigilante group of pedophile hunters. He was tortured with lighters and knuckle dusters and threatened with a shotgun in his mouth for not confessing to his crimes. At some point, the group poured hot water over Bradley's head and cut off his hand with a chainsaw since he continued to deny the false allegations. They then left him in the trunk of a hot car for 21 hours before executing him in the woods. Several people were sentenced to years in prison for the horrific murder, including Bradley's wife. In 1986, 21-year-old Christopher Thomas Knight ran out of gas in rural Maine, entered the woods, and lived there for the next 27 years without human contact. He survived by committing over 1,000 burglaries against houses in the area to be able to endure the harsh winters of Maine. Knight was eventually captured by a game warden and sentenced to 7 months in jail, later vowing to live normally and to never steal again. In the 19th century, African woman Sarah Bartman was displayed as a freak show attraction in Europe for her unusually large backside. Marketed as the missing link between man and beast, She was often brought out as an exhibit at wealthy parties and private events. In 1815, Sarah died of an unknown illness at the age of 26, likely as a result of her poor living conditions. Her remains were later displayed in the French Museum of Natural History for over a century, before she was finally laid to rest in her native South Africa in 2002. The career of actor Armie Hammer quickly fell off in 2021, when several women accused him of being an abusive partner and aspiring cannibal. For example, his ex-girlfriend Courtney Vucekovich says their relationship was like dating Hannibal Lecter. She claims he genuinely tried convincing her to remove one of her ribs so that he could barbecue and eat it. In a collection of alleged messages, Armie claimed that he wanted to cut her skin and drink her blood, but that he would stitch her up again so as not to waste a perfect slave. In 1978, Hustler magazine owner Larry Flynt was shot in the spine by a white supremacist serial killer, who was apparently outraged by an interracial photo shoot in one of the magazine editions. Flynt survived the murder attempt but was left permanently paralyzed from the waist down. Years later, Flynt pleaded for his attacker to be spared from execution, saying, "A government that forbids killing among its citizens should not be in the business of killing people itself." But with up to 22 total victims and the desire to start a race war, the serial killer was eventually put to death by lethal injection. Around 1:30 a.m. in August of 2021, a woman wearing only a bra and leggings was captured on a trail cam in a remote North Carolina forest. 3 hours later, she was captured again, this time walking much slower with a noticeable limp. 6 months later, the woman's remains were found in the same area, still wearing the same clothing. Despite all efforts to identify her, the woman remains a complete mystery to this day. In November of '99, the girlfriend of Panthers wide receiver Ray Caruth was shot 4 times and later died in the hospital. It was soon determined that her NFL boyfriend had hired a hitman to kill her after she reportedly refused to abort their baby. The baby ended up surviving, and Caruth went to prison for 19 years before being released in 2018. During a tense pro basketball game in 1992, Serbian player Boban Jankovic was frustrated with a foul call and slammed his head into a padded concrete post. He immediately dropped to the floor and was never able to walk again after badly damaging his spinal cord. Earlier this year, 44-year-old Pennsylvania man John Matthew Chapman was sentenced to life in prison after driving his girlfriend across the country and luring her into a Nevada desert for a bondage photo shoot. He then bound her to a signpost with zip ties, taped her mouth and nose shut, and watched as she died. In 2008, Canadian woman Marilyn Bergeron told her family that something terrible had happened but wouldn't elaborate, calling it worse than assault or witnessing a crime, and that she no longer felt safe living alone. Soon afterwards, she left her Quebec City home and completely disappeared. This last photo shows her withdrawing $60 from an ATM on the day she vanished, and she was never seen again.